The oldest player in the history of the league was an astonishing 45 years old. But even crazier than that is the fact that the oldest rookie to ever play was also 45 years old. They were the same player. Nikola J. Hickey, more commonly referred to as Nat Hickey, was the head coach of the Providence Steamrollers in 1948. The thing is, his team was awful, with a losing record of only 4-25. In a desperate attempt to help his squad, Hickey activated himself for 2 games, but it was all in vain as he shot over 6 in those games. The Steamrollers went on to lose both games and finished the season with a 6-42 record. He retired as a player just 2 days before his 46th birthday. Tracy McGrady scored arguably the easiest basket in the history of the game. It came on opening night of the 07-08 season against the Los Angeles Lakers. If you want to know how rough things were for Kobe before Pau Gasol showed up, then look no further than this clip. The ball is deflected by Derek Fisher, which is then up for grabs between Kwame Brown and Luke Walton. But somehow, Luke and Kwame managed to bobble it into the Rockets' basket. Despite the fact that Los Angeles tipped it in, it counted as 2 points for Houston. And based on the NBA's rules, the bucket is credited to the nearest Houston player to the basket, which was Tracy McGrady, who was standing a step inside of the 3-point line 20 feet away from the basket. And he didn't even touch the ball on that possession. Getting buckets doesn't get much easier than that. If your team ends up getting the first overall pick, you're probably going to be a very excited basketball fan. But history tells us that you might want to temper those expectations a bit, as first overall picks are a bit more of a crapshoot than you might think. In the history of the league, there have been 76 first overall picks, and surprisingly, only 45 of those have gone on to be NBA All-Stars. Furthermore, only 29 of those picks have ended up making at least 3 All-Star teams. And probably the most damning stat of them all is the fact that only 11 out of 76 first overall picks ended up winning a championship with the team that drafted them. I think this tells us 3 things. 1, evaluating talent is hard. 2, injuries can happen regardless of your talent. And 3, it's difficult to retain a franchise player when free agency arrives. So again, it's okay to be happy when you land that pick, but you might want to be somewhat cautious as well. It's hard to dominate the game of basketball, but it's something else entirely to do it throughout the regular season, offensively and defensively, and on the game's biggest stage, the NBA Finals. Michael Jordan is the only player in NBA history to win an MVP, a scoring title, first team all-defense, an NBA championship, and a Finals MVP, all in the same season. And, oh yeah, almost forgot to mention that he did this 4 times. Magic Johnson had an iconic rookie season that everyone continuously praises. But it didn't start off with sunshine and rainbows, as few people know that Magic got absolutely torched on his debut game in the NBA. It was on October 12, 1979, on opening night against the San Diego Clippers. Offensively, Magic had a fantastic debut game, displaying his flashy playmaking while pouring in 26 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and 4 blocks on 48% shooting. What Magic was defending, though, was the 6'2" shooting guard World B. Free, who was just beginning his career year. Magic could do little to contain him, as Free gave him a brutal welcome to the league, as he dropped 46 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and 7 steals on 65% shooting. Fortunately for Magic, he had some help, and when the game was on the line, it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar who hit the game-winning buzzer beater to seal the contest for Los Angeles. Speaking of a Laker hitting buzzer beaters, many people view Kobe Bryant as one of the most clutch players the game has ever seen, but no season was more clutch from him than the 09-10 season. The Mamba was on a mission to repeat as champion, and throughout the course of the regular season, he hit a total of 7 game-winning shots. Thanks to his efforts, the Lakers finished with the first seed in the Western Conference, which gave them home court advantage throughout the West. But if Kobe had missed those same 7 shots, the Lakers would have instead finished as the 8th seed in the Western Conference. If that's not a clutch contribution for your team, then I don't know what is. Kevin Durant is the greatest horse player in the history of the NBA. Well, at the very least, he's won the competition more than anyone else. Some of you may have not known that this was actually a thing, but the NBA officially held 4 different horse competitions throughout their history. One in 1978, in 2009 and 2010, and then again in 2020. Paul Westphal was the competition's first winner, defeating the likes of Pistol Pete Maravich, Kevin Greavy, and Maurice Lucas. KD won in 2009, defeating OJ Mayo and ISO Joe Johnson. In 2010, he repeated, beating Rajon Rondo and Omri Caspi. And finally, in 2020, Mike Conley won. I always thought it was a fun competition, but it may seem a bit boring to the casual fan. Do you guys think this competition should make a return? Let me know in the comments below. Reggie Miller and Kobe Bryant had a lot of battles, most famously in the 2000 NBA Finals. But did you know that they got into not just a battle, but an actual fight? It took place on March 1st, 2002. Remember the Zion Williamson dunk that had everyone up in their feelings? Well, there's been numerous examples of opposing players getting upset because the winning team was running up the score. That's essentially what happened here between Kobe and Reggie, as the Mamba launched this three-pointer as the shot clock was expiring. Reggie obviously didn't like this and had some choice words for Bryant, and before you know it, the two were tackling each other over the scorer's table. It took a while to get it all broken up. When you look at the replay, you can see that Miller said something that Kobe just couldn't forgive, as it was the Lakers star who threw the first punch. Both players ended up receiving a 2-game suspension. What's kind of interesting is that Reggie is probably the only player who can claim that he got into a fight with both Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. I'm starting to feel like I say this every year, but we are in the middle of a historic season from Nikola Jokic. We're currently at the AllStar break, and as things currently stand, he's on pace to have the highest assist average by a center of all time. He's also on pace to become the first center in NBA history to average a triple-double over the course of the season. And arguably, the most impressive fact is that with a minimum of 10 shot attempts per game, he's on pace to have the highest true shooting percentage in NBA history. Justifiably, the nickname The Record Book was given to the great Wilt Chamberlain. But if there's a modern player who deserves that title as well, it may just be the Joker. In terms of physicality, the league isn't what it used to be. The NBA presented a much more violent product back in the 1980s, and for the most part, that was a pretty widely accepted fact by both the league office and by the referees. Nothing really proves that point better than this fact. Bill Laimbeer is recognized by many people, including yours truly, as the dirtiest player in NBA history, as he was easily the most violent and physically assertive player on the notorious Bad Boy Pistons. He was constantly sneaking in cheap shots, hitting players excessively hard, and often appeared as if he was trying to outright hurt the opposing player. But here's the details that sum up how different the league was in the 80s. Despite egregiously dirty plays like this, and this, among numerous others, Laimbeer was never suspended and actually managed to get the 5th longest streak of games played in league history, with a total of 685. All this dirtiness and absurdity, yet no suspensions. Finally, that streak ended as the league decided to suspend him for just 1 game when he got into this fight and punched Cleveland's Brad Daugherty in the face. This whole thing makes you wonder just how much Laimbeer would be getting suspended if he played in the modern NBA. Anthony Davis's bones are made out of graham crackers. We all know this. He isn't even 30 years old yet, and the guy has missed 219 regular season games. Then there's an Iron Man like John Stockton, who missed a grand total of 22 games in his 19 years in the NBA. So this got me thinking. Based on the rate in which John Stockton missed games, how long would he have had to have played in order to miss more games than Anthony Davis? In short, 10 times longer than he actually played in the NBA. In order to miss as many games as Anthony Davis has, John Stockton would have had to have played 190 seasons in the NBA. He would have missed 220 games and would have retired at the young age of 211 years old. Is this a more positive stat about Stockton or a more negative one about Davis? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As many of you know, the game of basketball was invented by Dr. James Naismith in 1891. When Naismith created the game, one of the things he quickly introduced was his list of the 13 rules of basketball. These are the rules listed on the screen. To me, some of the more interesting ones are rules like number 3, which prohibits a player from running with a basketball. The other one that's crazy is Rule 13, which basically states that if a game is tied at the end of regulation, overtime will be decided in a sudden death fashion, meaning that the first team that scores in overtime wins. Obviously, that model was not sustainable, and the game has come a long way since then. Most of you probably know this, but if there's 0.3 of a second or less left on the clock, the ball cannot be caught and shot within that time and have the basket count. The ball must be simply tapped in that situation in order for the basket to count. But do you know why that rule was put into effect? It all goes back to January 15, 1990, in a regular season matchup between the New York Knicks and the Chicago Bulls. The game was tied at 106 with only 0.1 of a second remaining, and New York was inbounding the ball. Chicago was positioning themselves to defend an alley-oop pass to Patrick Ewing, but the Knicks went with something else entirely. They inbounded the ball to the open Trent Tucker, who quickly heaved the ball high into the air. The refs counted the basket, and the Knicks won the game. The Bulls coach Phil Jackson was irate after the game, and said in a post-game interview that it wasn't physically possible for Tucker to catch and release that shot within 0.1 of a second. At the conclusion of the regular season, the league office immediately instated the Trent Tucker rule, which is a rule that still stands to this day, where a player cannot catch and shoot the ball with 0.3 of a second or less. Kobe Bryant is one of the most explosive scorers that the game has ever seen, as he could pour in a tremendous amount of points in a short period of time. No fact may better prove that point than this one. Up until recently, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the NBA's all-time leading scorer, with close to 40,000 points. His career high happened in 1971, when he exploded on the Boston Celtics for 55 points. As impressive as that is, the Mamba scored 55 points in a single half, which he did in the 81-point game against Toronto in 2006. As we all know, the NBA All-Star Game has become an obnoxiously high-scoring affair, but it hasn't always been that way. There have been 148 All-Star teams throughout the history of the NBA, and in only 11 of those instances did a team fail to score at least 100 points. But it is worth mentioning that since 1974, every single All-Star team has scored over 100 points. The lowest scoring NBA All-Star game was in 1953, with a final score of the West 79, the East 75. George Mikan was the game's MVP, but even he didn't have a pretty performance. Both teams shot below 40% from the field, the West 35.4% and the East 37.9%. Now, would you rather have an All-Star game where each team scored around 75 points, or where each team scored nearly 200 points? Let me know below. Which one was your favorite fact, and do you have any new facts to share with the rest of us? Let me know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.